Week 12 recap time. Interesting story before we get started, and I know there was a trade also, but I'm sorry that this is on a Friday, although the Wednesday game, I guess it's not really late, but I would have done it yesterday, but my life has been a little interesting these last few days, just because I'm sure a lot of you know TikTok. We're all probably a little bit old for TikTok. I think this league's also a little bit old for TikTok, but try to make a page because my dad's a diamond dealer and he sells diamonds, engagement rings, and that's been his career. And I wanted to make a page where he kind of shares information just because a lot of people pay like probably too much money for a lot of diamonds and get ripped off. Figured it'd be helpful for some people if we created a page and like made some videos giving tips, and figured that we get like 10-20 views. But posted videos like 3 days ago now, and came back to it, like didn't even check until like the next day, and then we were at like hundreds of thousands of views, and now we're at like a couple million views and a ton of stuff like that. Like I think it just went viral. Not that it will stay like that, but we're just getting so many comments, emails, and stuff. So I've been like really just focused on that. Don't tell my job. I probably should have took some time away from work as well. But that's why this week's been a little hectic. I also did pay attention to football because this happened right after Sunday, but I've been a little out of the loop. So I haven't been seeing like the latest day-to-day. Like this coach says they're going to use this running back, but this will be my week of being more amateur. I don't know. Maybe I'm always amateur. But anyway, I do know what's going on in the NFL because I'm still obsessed with it. So let's just talk about it. The 1 week left, obviously massive week this past week, and this upcoming week is just as big, maybe more. But let's first talk about the trade. The trade was between Pain Train and the Profit. Pain Train got Cooper Kupp, gave up Robert Tonyan. This is interesting. Tonyan was actually free in my league until last week. I definitely see the value there. For me, it's hard because I had on my team, just to show the bias, I have Rodgers, Aaron Jones, and Devontae Adams. So I couldn't pick up Tonyan. Just in my head, I'm like, I can't have another Packer. So in my head, he was untouchable. So he was sitting free agency for a while, although I probably would have taken him otherwise because I don't have a tight end. So in my head, he's valued less than he is. But I do see the value there in a year that tight ends are unbelievably thin, and it's so hard to find a guy who can reliably get you production. Tonyan is as close to that as every other guy except for maybe 3 or 4 tight ends in the league. He's probably a top 10 tight end at this point. So I get it, but I do think Cooper Kupp's on another level personally. I love that passing offense. Kupp could be inconsistent this season a little bit, but I think especially down the stretch when the Rams need wins, Kupp's the most reliable guy. Him and Woods, I think, are both going to be honestly fantastic this season. So yes, I think Kupp, we're looking at a higher end wide receiver too, and I find a lot of value there. But if your team is really good on wide receiver, you don't feel like you need it, I understand this trade. I do think Pain Train won this trade, but listen, if your team, the Profit, you didn't have a tight end, now you have a tight end that could get you a certain amount of points, I can't really blame you. I know that's not the deepest analysis because this is an example of a trade where, like, yes, objectively, I have a guy, but that's the point of trades. If you could mutually benefit both teams, then that's a great trade, and this could be a great trade, depending on the team structure. So with that being said, let's go into the recap for last week. Then we'll do a little bit quicker recaps this week so that we could also talk about the playoff picture going into next week. So with that being said, let's talk about week 12. First game was between Team The Profit and Team We Went With Jared. Team The Profit got the win, had a pretty big week, 191 points to 141. Team We Went With Jared was already pretty irrelevant, so this clinches them being relegated and unfortunately going home. But Team The Profit with a massive win to go to 6-6. This was a must win against a winnable team, so you got it. You owe a lot of it to Mahomes. Mahomes is just proving to be the number one quarterback. There were some thoughts in my head where it's like, do I prefer Kyler earlier this season? Do I prefer Russell? It's Mahomes all the way. So you're in a great spot if you have Mahomes at quarterback. The interesting situation comes to your running backs because they're both guys who aren't like lock-in RB1s or anything like that, because you have Mike Davis and David Montgomery. So those are 2 RB2s right now. If McCaffrey comes back, Mike Davis is obviously, we've talked about, Mike Davis is going to lose a lot of value. So you needed Montgomery to show you something. If there's going to be a team that's going to go deep. And Montgomery did exactly that. Broke off a really fantastic looking 50-plus yard run that people didn't think he was qualified for or capable of because he's kind of slow. For one of the first carries of the game. Then he gets in the end zone with the passing reception. Of course, I was playing against Montgomery, but that's besides the point. It's still won. That passing touchdown was so annoying though because the game was over and they lined up like it was obviously going to be a screen. Montgomery was behind 3 wide receivers. It was the clearest play in the world. They did it and he made it easily. But that's besides the point. So you need Montgomery to come through. You got to pray that that value continues. The great news for you is him being involved in the passing game because Chicago will be down most games, and he got 6 targets, 5 catches, 40 yards, touchdown. That's a dream. Game script was them coming from behind. If he wasn't involved in the passing game, he gets an 8-point game here. He was involved, he gets you 30 points. Cooper Kupp's off the roster now, had an off week. Is what it is, honestly. I mean, you don't have him anymore. But you did that to replace Jared Cook. I respect it. Because you need to make the playoffs. You need a good tight end the next week or two. Definitely this week. And Jared Cook's not that with Taysom Hill. He's probably going to get you at most 5 points unless he gets in the end zone with Taysom Hill at quarterback. So that's actually, now that I'm really looking at your team, I mean, I get it. I definitely understand it. So what's your wide receiver group going to look like? It's going to be... Wow, wait. I hope that trade happened before Fuller was announced out for the season because now you're thinner. I didn't even notice you had Fuller. So it's going to be Diggs. This used to be a deep wide receiver group, and now you got to rely on Diggs. You got to rely on Amari, who had a big week, but okay. And then you got to rely on Ayuk. That's okay. I get it. I understand. I mean, the drop off is really from Kupp to Ayuk to go from Cook to Tonyan. Wow, that is tight. If it's in a must win, I get it. As long as Ayuk plays, I haven't looked it up. I'm assuming he's going to be playing. So the Fuller thing hurts you. I mean, this is not a team that people are terrified of, but it's a team that could do damage just because you're high-end quarterback. I talked a lot about this team, but it's only because it's right on the brink. I won't talk so much about we went with Jared. The season's over. Zeke has been a massive disappointment for you this season, so there's not really much more to talk about there. Your team was always a little bit, from my perspective, a little bit thin later in the season because of the mainly because of Julio injury. Once you lost Julio, team got too thin. You had John Brown out, you had Julio out, so... you have to make starts that I just don't love. Damian Harris, I really don't like that start personally, although some people like him. And you know what? Jarvis actually ended up showing more value too, so this is frustrating because this team, once you got Julio back, this team could have been actually a very strong team, but at 3-9, it's done. I mean, there was just too many Zeke disappointments, Julio injury, Chubb injury, just too many things lined up against you. I've touched upon that in the past, but now that I'm seeing also Landry show value, that's another piece that would have been kind of dangerous in the playoffs, so that's frustrating. This was a massive game. Pain Train versus Paco Libre. Pain Train could have really clinched their way with a win, but they did not. Only putting up 123, losing to Paco Libre at 151, who I believe is alive for the playoff picture, but we'll revisit that at the end. Pain Train, it really just came down to Kyler Murray having a very disappointing game. If he had a good game, you could have won this game. Only 6.9 points, very disappointing. Dalvin got a little bit banged up too. I'm sure that was a bit frustrating, and he lost a fumble. Aaron Jones, another game where the game script just didn't favor him, so they went to Jamal because they didn't need Aaron Jones, who is the better running back. So that's what it came down to. Quarterback and running back, those are 3 guys that you could expect to average you at least 20 points per week, getting you 10 points at the most. So that's really the reason behind the loss. But Pain Train, you're 6-6. I think you will make the playoffs. We'll revisit that at the end based on standings because I have to look at it again. But based on where you are now, I think you're going to win next week. I think you're going to make the playoffs, and I think you could do damage in the playoffs. Whereas Paco Libre, a team that we said was very underrated earlier in the season, continues to show value. Although there's a lot of inconsistencies on this team. So when you have Johnson on the Texans and Drake on the Cardinals, it's just too much inconsistency there where I could view you as a contender to win it all. I think you could win any given week, especially with the wide receiver group of DeAndre, Michael Thomas, and Robbie Anderson. And Michael Thomas is a whole nother thing, but we'll get back there. But with that running back group being too inconsistent, I just don't see you putting 3 wins together. 4, I guess. You would need to win this week, and then we'll look at the standings, see what's actually possible. Then you'd have to win 3 playoff games. I just don't see that happening. So good for you staying alive and putting up a fight, but I don't think Duke and DJ are going to be enough. With that being said, let's go to the next game. Another big one. Wow, a lot of big games. El Captain needed the win to put themselves in a good situation, but their loss keeps a lot of other teams alive as well, as the chairman gets a win to continue to be dominant in this league, going to 9-3. Let's go to the chairman first. The chairman got a massive game out of Derrick Henry again, another massive game out of James Robinson. Those AFC South running backs on this team are going to really be able to carry this team pretty deep. The question for me has always been wide receiver. It's a lot of unproven guys, Deontay Johnson, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin. When I say unproven, I just mean like not those star guys, big names, not on the best offenses necessarily, and especially not best passing offense. Deontay on a decent one, but with a lot of wide receivers. And yeah, I mean, not high draft picks or anything like that, but you're getting value right now. So if they could keep going, they could keep going. I don't think they're going to keep going at the rate they're currently going, but that's just so subjective. And your running backs are stable enough where you could have that kind of inconsistent wide receiver group that has really no ceiling, that all have been shown that they could get a 30-plus game here and again. So when you have Mike Evans in the flex, who is that big name, a guy who will probably get a touchdown or two every couple weeks, then I gotta assume that we all have to consider this team one of the front runners to win it all. That's it. El Captain with the loss, going to 6-6. This is a team that I do not consider a front runner to win it all. When you look at this lineup that he put together this week, even though he had a pretty good game at 137 or a decent game by how your league scores. Actually, I guess 137, by the way, your league scores is a little bit below average. I'd have to see that. But either way, Tom Brady at quarterback, Brian Hill, Kareem Hunt, Juju, Cole Beasley, Christian Kirk. None of those guys I would shit on and say, like, sit them down. But, I mean, you heard the names. When you're competing against other teams, when I was talking about this team you played this week, James Robinson, Derrick Henry, Justin Jefferson, especially without Thielen in, it's just a different level. Fortunately for you, make up for it at the tight end position, but it's overcompensated. You don't want to have to start 2 tight ends. It worked this week with Kelsey and Ingram, but you don't want to have to start that. So going into next week, you're going to hope Gurley comes back, I assume. You're going to pray McCaffrey comes back, and that's going to be the difference maker for this team. I do think this is a team that could have benefited from a trade to get a better wide receiver earlier, but hey, we are where we are. I would assume the trade deadline's hit by now, but maybe you don't have one. We are where we are, and you have to hope your running back group carries you, and you could play a running back in the flex, so you don't need to start 2 tight ends, and then you have 3 decent wide receivers. Anything could happen. I don't see this team being a front runner, but any team's alive at this point. The Professor S got taken over with the loss going to 8-4, not in first place. We've been praising Professor S, but if you're watching football, you're not surprised because Alvin Kamara, my phone alarm's running off. I'm not going to edit this video. I'm just going to leave this running. Enjoy the alarm music in the background. For the 5 seconds I'm going to take to turn it off. Okay. Thank you for sticking around. This is bad TV. That was my wake-up alarm, and it's noon. That's not a joke. I usually wake up at like 9, but I set alarms just in case, based on my first work meeting, which is now in 10 minutes. That was it. So that's me. Okay, so I don't remember what I was talking about. Team the Banditos against Professor S. So Professor S got... Okay, if you're watching football, you know Alvin Kamara with Taysom Hill is a RB2 at most. I have Alvin Kamara. It's killer. Hopefully you need to only deal with this for one more week, and it's not going to matter because you're already in the playoffs. You're going to pray Breeze comes back by playoff time. Pray, or if you get a bye by that time, because if not, I mean, this team takes a huge step down. This is a team I love, but if you do not have Alvin Kamara, it takes a huge step down. It is very vulnerable. So I'm a fan of Professor S's team. I think all season just shown to be a dominant team, making the right decisions. But as of right now, especially with Taysom Hill, I mean, it's almost worth considering benching Alvin Kamara, but you just can't. We can't. But 8-4. Not the top team in the league anymore. Probably strength-wise, not the top team with Alvin Kamara out. We're going to need to see him come back before I could really say the way I've been saying all season that I think this team's going to win it all. If I had to put my money on it, I still would because I think Kamara's going to be back. And he's going to be pretty well rested by the time Brees comes back, but we'll see. Team the Banditos, a massive win. This was a must-win against a dominant team, and you got it. And you needed to put 200 points up because, hey, Professor S put up 176. He had a good week. Banditos, though, needed to put 200-plus points up, and you did. Aaron Rodgers helped a ton at 33. You had actually really good production out of Tyreek Hill, and when I say really good, I mean 67 points. And you all already know this, but unbelievable. And that was actually what did it. If Tyreek Hill got 36 points, you would have lost the game. That's ridiculous. So, Banditos, massive win. I mean, I actually think this was a team that I was really hard on earlier this season. There's another league with a team called the Banditos, so I always get them mixed up, but pretty sure I was pretty hard on this team, and I will remain that way. Yes, I will remain that way. I am very stubborn. This is a good team, but it's not. It is not going to win it all, and you could mark my words on that. Does not have the consistency from any position outside of quarterback and maybe Tyreek for me to feel like this team's going to be able to do it. Yes, you could beat anyone in the playoffs, similar to what I was just talking about, but this is not a team that can win 3 straight weeks. So as Professor S, you could win 3 straight weeks. Your floor is massively high. Banditos, your floor, I could see you putting up 100 points flat and getting knocked out. So we'll keep an eye out. I mean, massive kudos to you. I know I'm being a little bit negative, but massive kudos to you for getting to this point. I mean, I think this team is impressive starts and it's just working out for you. I don't know. It's doing better than I thought is what I'm trying to say. So you deserve credit and I deserve some scolding. But no, you will not win it all. And if you do, I'll make a 10-minute video just saying I'm so stupid over and over again. And I don't know why you'd watch that, but if you did, then I don't think it'd be entertaining. So I guess I won't do that video. Okay, the last matchup was between titties up, titties down, and team straight knockout. I can't believe how many times I say titties up, titties down. Okay, team straight knockout. A lucky win here, but it doesn't matter. You're 4-8. It was over. The real relevant thing, if you're watching the recap, I don't want to not say anything. All I'll say is it's shocking that you got a win while playing a running back that got you 4.9 and a wide receiver that got you 0. Very surprising. I don't love that team at all. There's really nothing to say about that team, unfortunately. I mean, you already know that it's been a good run. Enjoy this win because you may be playing spoiler a little bit. I mean, you knocked titties up, titties down out of a bye. I'm pretty sure. I'll look at the standings. And I think they should be good for the playoffs. But this is a relevant game for seeding, so good for you. Titties up, titties down. What happened, man? Running backs. You know Melvin's not valuable right now. If Philip Lindsay's out, maybe, but you know he's not valuable right now. You cannot feel good about starting him. Josh Jacobs, that's not on you. He got banged up. The wide receiver group we've talked about. I actually like that wide receiver group. But Eckler on the bench makes no sense to me. 23.9. I guess you're thinking, yeah, he's back. He might be kind of limited, but it's Austin Eckler. Like the guys you started over, Mike Pittman, and Melvin. Like, come on. You're a playoff team. You're a good owner, but you got to do better than that. It's playoff time. It's time to step it up. That was probably unnecessarily intense, but yeah, I mean, at 7-5, Eckler is a must start from now on. I would consider benching Melvin, but honestly, I'd probably still go Melvin over Pittman. That's on you. You could decide that. The way you currently structure your team last week isn't going to do it against some of the top teams, so let's keep an eye out on how titties up, titties down does. So let's talk about next week. This is a massive week because looking at the standings, there's a lot to play for. So just to recap the standings, 2 teams have definitely clinched, but really more teams than that clinch. Professor's in the second seed now, despite having way more points than the Chairman. I still think being the better team, but the Chairman at number 1. The bye is essentially resolved 100%, because the only way Professor S loses the bye is a loss and titties up, titties down, getting a win and making up for a 230 point differential. I'm assuming like most 90% of leagues, points 4 is the tiebreaker. If I'm wrong, then this is going to be irrelevant, but pretty sure it will be. So the byes are clinched. So we're really just talking playoffs now. When we talk about playoffs, everyone technically didn't clinch yet because the Banditos at 6-6 could come back from anyone. Technically, titties up, titties down, if there were no mutual playing games, would not have clinched because if all the 6-6 teams won and he lost, he could miss it out by point differential. With that being said, we do see a matchup between the Banditos and Pain Train, which is massive because 2 6-6 teams, one of them will lose, so titties up, titties down is also clinched. So now we're talking a race between 4 teams for 3 spots. It's going to be, for sure, one of the teams in the matchup we just talked about. The loser of that is at a massive disadvantage, of course, because now they're relying on 2 other games. The Banditos and Pain Train also, when it comes to points, Pain Train is second most for that record, but Banditos is least, but only 8 points behind. So it's really going to be all on this week, including the point differential. Normally at this point in the season, the points you get on the last week, it kind of matters. It can matter if it's a ton, kind of like we were talking with Professor S. But for playoffs, they're so tight that those 3 teams, Pain Train, Captain, and Banditos, are within 8 points of each other. Even the Prophet technically is comebackable. In my eyes, I think the Prophet is pretty safe because you know one of the teams below you are going to lose in the matchup, and you'd have to get outscored by, if it's Pain Train, you'd have to get outscored by 70, and then you'd also need El Capitan to win. So your odds of making the playoffs are around 90 to 95%. Pain Train and Banditos playing each other, that game, I mean, the winner's in, obviously, you clinch. The loser is at a lot of risk because especially if El Captain wins, you lose. You're out. Even if El Captain loses, it goes to points. So I think it's really going to come down to the loser of that game. I mean, maybe El Captain chokes, and you are playing titties up, titties down, which is a pretty strong team. But it's more about your point overall. I really think it's going to come down to winner of the Banditos versus Pain Train. When you look at this matchup, let's look at what we got. So the keys here for me are at the running back position. It's 2 strong running back groups. I like Pain Train's running back group more. You have Dalvin against Jacksonville. You're going to be up big. The only risk there is if Dalvin, because he's a little bit banged up, they say he's fine. But if they're up 30-0 or 21-0 or whatever, because Jacksonville's not a strong team, do they rest Dalvin? Do they play instead of a 80-20 Dalvin to Madison? Do they go 60-40 or something like that? We'll see. I mean, Dalvin's probably actually closer to 90, even more than 80 normally. But Jacksonville is the perfect game script you could hope for. Aaron Jones also a pretty good game script. Philly is not a awful team. They're not good, but they're not awful in the way that Packers had a couple of teams like that lately, and it could be a fast-paced team as well. So you might see a good amount of plays in the total plays in the game. So total stats for Aaron Jones could go up. And if they're not up by a ton, he could be used a decent amount. So Philly's a pretty decent matchup. So your running backs have a good matchup. Miles Sanders at Green Bay. The only concern I have here is the fact that they're probably going to be playing from behind. We just talked about that game. I don't think it's going to be a blowout like some people might think, but they're probably going to be playing from behind Philly. The issue is they're using Boston Scott in the passing game, and I don't know why. Miles Sanders is a much more talented running back. I think that that's what this game's going to come down to. Miles Sanders' usage in the passing game is probably the X factor of this game for the Banditos. I don't think Banditos is good enough to win this game. I think Pain Train, for me, is a 15 to 20 point favorite in this game. But if Miles Sanders gets used in the passing game, that could compensate for that 15, 20 points, and then this game could go either way. That's the main game to really talk about. I guess we could talk about... Oh, Paco Libre is probably pissed right now that I didn't even talk about his playoff potential. My bad. Paco, my bad. But the reason I didn't is because you're down 100 total points to the next level. So if Paco Libre wants to make the playoffs, they're going to need 2 of those 6-6 teams to lose, and they're going to need to win with making up for over 100-point differential. Possible, yes. You're going to need to go crazy. I'm not going to talk about your team this week because it's just too big of a long shot. The only other teams I will talk about is Team the Prophet going up to Team the Chairman. Team the Prophet, you're playing a better team right now. So I don't like the opportunity for you. Right now you have Mike Davis on the bench because of a bye. That's awful timing for you. You lost Will Fuller. You got to start Nyheim Hines alongside Montgomery, Ayuk, Watkins, Diggs. It's just not comparable to this Chairman team. So I think Team the Prophet's actually going to get the loss. We just talked about Team the Prophet. This is my longest recap ever for this league. Team the Prophet, you're at top for points, so it would require an absolute choke to miss the playoffs. I don't think your team's going to do that bad to lose that playoff spot. Just try and put up 110 points and you're in. Even 100 points should be good enough. So I think you're good, although I think you're the least strong, especially with Mike Davis on bye, of all the 4 6-6 teams that we're talking about. Finally, the last 6-6 team to talk about was, remind me, it was El Captain. El Captain going against TBD, I guess we touched upon briefly, but another team that I just don't love the strength of the team. You don't have McCaffrey, so that's unfortunate. He was on bye anyway. But you're going Brady on bye, so you're going Kirk Cousins. I like that pickup. That's a pretty good matchup against Jacksonville. I don't like how much they pass, but it's a good matchup. That secondary is horrific. I think titties up, titties down is a much stronger team, especially with Eckler coming back. So I think El Captain's going to lose all as well. To summarize all of that, it's all between 4 teams. Really between 3 teams, because I think Team Prophet, despite losing this week, I think is still going to make it. Pain Train, Banditos, El Captain. I think El Captain loses, and I think that El Captain will actually get... Wow, I'm actually going against what I used to say just after looking at El Captain's team. You know what? Let's go 50-50. It's 50-50 between the team that loses between Banditos and Pain Train and El Captain. My guess right now, I think El Captain might choke this one away. I think their team could really have an off week and might choke this one away. But we'll see. Anyway, that is the longest recap we've done all season. 23 minutes about. Good luck to everyone. Excited to see who makes the playoffs. And have a great day. Bye. Oh, the TikTok. If anyone wants to know that TikTok, not that I'm publicizing it because I don't know who's looking for jewelry. I think I told you, my mind's all over the place. But Next Door Jeweler is the TikTok. If anyone has a TikTok, feel free to check it out. Bye.